Hey, welcome back to yet another episode of the Wooten Podcast. As I had mentioned last episode, I was going to talk about Proxy Teen and now the new album called Doxy Me. I wouldn't really consider Doxy Me an album, really. It's just a music project that I went into. And so, without further ado, let's get started. So, Proxy Teen was written in 2022, as I had mentioned before. I'm not going to mention anything further than what I had already. I'm not going to mention anything more about what I had already mentioned in previous podcasts about what Proxy Teen is about. So, I'm currently driving, which is a new thing I'm doing for the podcast. Normally, I'm just sitting in my car because it's a quiet place without any, air conditioning noises or anything like that, but now you are hearing that, and you might hear a horn honk or two, but hey, it's nothing new. But, hey, let's continue. So, Proxy Teen, like I said, was written in 2022, and if you have listened to the previous podcast that I have made, the one about Proxy Teen and the past, present, and future episode, then you already know somewhat of what it's about, so I'll continue on from there. So, Proxy Teen was written about just feeling numb on medications and this certain period I was at in my life, which I would describe as my lowest point in my life, or should I say the aftermath of the lowest point of my life. And I felt like garbage. So I wanted to make an album that sounded like garbage, and it's very messy, it's very cringy, but at the same time, there is a certain industrial charm to it, and that's exactly what I was going for, because I was heavily into industrial music at the time, ranging from secular to industrial Christian music. Secular industrial music being the likes of Skinny Puppy, but also the likes of Christian artists like Skillet. Most people don't even know Skillet made industrial music, but in the 90s they were kind of like the Christian 9 Inch Nails, so to speak, which was another artist I was heavily invested in at the time. And one way I've described Proxy Teen is how to turn Hurt by 9 Inch Nails into an entire album in a mediocre way. And that's kind of what it is, It's almost like, it also kind of sounds like John Denver singing through radio static. It kind of sounds like you're switching radio stations and you hear a bunch of sad John Denver songs just going in and out, And let me just stop there and elaborate on the static. The static of Proxy Teen was made accidentally, purely accidentally. I had no idea it was even being recorded. I don't really know how it got there. I was using microphone. It was an SM58, I believe, and it was bent out of shape, the microphone itself, and I think that may have had something to do with it, but I'm still not entirely sure. All I know is that using that microphone had something to do with the static, or something that my computer was picking up, or something like that from the microphone or from itself. I'm not really sure. Maybe there was a disconnect in the cords, but either way, it produced this overwhelming cancerous static. And the static really is what kept me from getting bored with the album, because at the time I had just flippantly just put like a burnt mesh of radio songs, singer-songwriter songs together that had these, half-baked written choruses and stuff like that, and all the songs were really depressing except the song Life is Good, I suppose, and Angel as well. That song is actually probably my favorite song off the album, Angel. But yeah. And with that being said, let me gather my thoughts here. So, the static, like I said, is what kept me from getting bored with the album. And the reason why is because it resonated with the level of static that was in my mind. Because if you don't know, when you're struggling with depression, especially with numbness and anxiety, the anxiety makes everything worse, and it's like this layer of static that gets louder and louder and softer and softer and louder depending on where you're at. And for me, it was just at this consistent fuzz almost, and everything just felt fuzzy and irritating and like nothing. And that was often what the static represented. It filled those empty spaces. And keep in mind, I recorded the entire album of Proxy in one take. And the reason why I recorded it in one take was because the first recording I had ever made of Lava Rock, quote unquote, was when I was a child. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and like I said in the previous podcast, I had the voice of a chipmunk, and I just improvised, really, just a bunch of random songs, and was improvising rock and roll, thrash metal, things like that. And I don't even know if I was coherently singing any lyrics or anything like that. I think I was just screaming and banging on the guitar. And it was around 8 songs or so, and I recorded it all in one take. So I was just like, well, that's what I'll do with this Proxy Team. And so that's what I went for. So with that in mind, let's do a quick rundown of this little EP that I made. So we'll start with track 1, I Can't Make You Feel. I Can't Make You Feel was created before I officially started writing the album. It was the only song that I had written before I was institutionalized, and that was why I made it the first song, because it was the first song written and what sounded like should go on the album. The song was originally written to be played on the piano, but I don't have enough piano skills to be played what was originally intended for the song, so I just put it on the guitar, and it translated beautifully horrendously ugly on the album in a beautiful way, because that's what the album sounds like. It sounds horrendous. It sounds horrible. It's a very ugly record, and purposefully so, because I would look in the mirror every day at the time and just be like, well, I'm ugly. And I felt that way and kind of looked that way. I was very gaunt and unhealthy looking and stuff like that. And speaking on visual representations of the album, I'll get to the album artwork after I'm done explaining the songs. So let's go to the second one. Well, first, before I go to the second one, let's talk about what I Can't Make You Feel means. The name really just speaks for itself. I felt like I couldn't feel anything, and therefore I couldn't make other people feel anything. And so I felt like people were abandoning me because I had nothing left to give. So with that being said, let's move on to the song, the second track, Coma. Coma was basically written about the aftermath of that, and it felt like, after I was institutionalized and everything like that, and put on all these medications, I felt like the real me had slipped into a coma. And, I was doing anything to make me feel awake, which is why, I was saying things like, as I brushed the nicotine from off my teeth and stuff like that, because I was trying to cover it up. And so let's move on. With that being said, let's move on to the 3 circles. The 3 circles were the metaphorical representation of the album artwork, so I guess we'll just get straight into that, because that's all it means. There are 3 circles. There are really more than 3 on the album cover, but there are 3 sets of circles, and each one of them meant something different. And the first set of circles, well, if you read the lyrics, you'll know exactly what it means. But anyways, it's kind of hard to explain. But my therapist at the time drew the picture that was on the album cover, and it struck me as creative inspiration at the time. And I was just like, that's it. That's the next album cover. And I didn't know what it was at the time. And then I made it, and that's just what it turned into. So, and that takes me to the 4th track, The Therapist and the Psychologist, I think was what it was called. And I mean, that song, again, it's self-explanatory. It's about my perspective at the time of doing therapy and psychiatry and stuff. Kind of has I shudder saying this, but it kind of has that song, track 4, Therapist and Psychologist, kind of has a Charles Manson feel to it. And so I had to take that and do the opposite, because it was just like getting too much, because I didn't want to feel like that guy. So I wrote the song Life is Good, and it was a positive song. It was the only song on the album that was written in a strictly optimistic manner. And it was really just about taking a breath of fresh air and living life and being happy and content, which is something I was trying to achieve at the time, and now I am, and I'm very proud of it. Life really is good, and I'm living it to the fullest now, and I'm very, very proud to say that. But, you know, as all good things must come to an end, that's the reason why that's the reason why the next song, Proxy Teen, came up. And Proxy Teen it's the title track of the album, and with that, the majority of the song is self-explanatory, but I need to explain what Proxy Teen means, what it means to be a proxy teen, the term that I basically invented. Proxy teen is a term that I no longer identify with. Let me just get that straight. But at the time I did, and it was very necessary, and it taught me a valuable lesson. And proxy teen means like, you know, you feel like a teen that's being controlled. And, you know, when you're a proxy, you're nothing but a vessel for somebody else. And that's how I felt at the time. I didn't feel like I was myself. I felt like the real me had became a vessel for somebody that I was not. And that person that I was not was controlling me. And at the time, you know, I was 21 years old, but I felt like I was still 15, because that's when I went through the majority of trauma and addiction and stuff like that. All got started to fall into place and fall to pieces at the same time when I was 15. And so, you know, proxy teen, I feel like a proxy, I feel like a teen being controlled. And I also took that term from Slender, the game Slender Man, who is also famous for his iconic static. Because whenever you die in Slender, all you see is static and Slender's face, which is another reason why the album art is black and white, because that's who he is, you know, he's black and white and gray. And so there's that as well. So moving forward, let's move on to the next track, Angel, track 7. But before I move on to Angel, track 7, let's I wanna say the reason why Proxy Teen is track 6 and Angel is track 7. 6-7. That meme is so stupid, but at the same time I've caught on to it, and for some odd reason I think it's funny, and I don't know why, and I feel like that's kind of how everyone else feels. So but yeah, 6-7. So Proxy Teen, track 6. The reason why I put it at track 6 is because the number 6 is the human number. You know, it's the number of man. And track 7, the number 7 is the holy number, is the representation of God or heaven, so to speak. So, you know, Proxy Teen, the type of man I felt like I was at the time, was put on track 6, and Angel was put on track 7. And Angel originally was written about many things. It was about longing to die and go to heaven, but it was also longing for a true significant other. And at the time, the the girl that I was with at the age of 15, my nickname for her was Angel. Little did I know that, she was not a girlfriend at all. She was an abuser. And, so ironically, I said, Angel, close your eyes, I'm waiting for you. But the song at the same time was not written about her, it was written about my future wife, and I referenced her not necessarily by the name Angel, but more so as just like a metaphor, because, I felt like I needed an angel sent from heaven to come save me from the despair I was in, and that's how I describe my wife, Sky. She has a very angelic nature, she's very pure of heart, and whenever I think of the song, I think of her all the time. But at the same time, in an even more ironic way, I also think of my sister-in-law, that Angel, and that, who is also my wife's sister. And I think of her in the sense of, obviously not in a romantic light, but more so just in a different way, just like, one sense the song is written about an actual angel and, longing to be in heaven, but also, as it was written about a future wife, now it has taken on a new meaning about my sister, Angel. So, and the reason why is because Angel it's just kind of a representation of how, I would be there for her as a older brother, and just as a loyalty anthem, so to speak, between me and her. So there's also that, has 3 different meanings now, for completely different reasons. One being a heavenly reasoning, and also a romantic reason, but also a family-oriented reason. So those are the 3 current different meanings of Angel for me. So last but not least, let's move on to track 8, Weathering It Out. Weathering It Out is the closing track, and the closing track, Weathering It Out, is also self-explanatory. It's about weathering it out throughout all the things I've described in the album, like feeling like I can't make other people feel, and I feel like the real me is in a coma, and there's these 3 circles that I'm looking at that my therapist drew, and I'm trying to understand what they mean and everything, and then dealing with the therapist and the psychiatrist, and the idea that I'm even sitting in the room with them and struggling to grasp the fact that life is good and I need to live it, and that life is beautiful, and then I just feel like a proxy and a team, and feeling like I'm not in control of myself, and longing for an angel of any kind, whether that be an actual angel or a significant other or a friend or any kind of angel. I felt like I needed some type of redemption of some kind, and weathering it out is really just the sum up of all of it. I'm weathering all of this baggage out, and that's really what it means. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. So that's that. That's Proxy Teen, but not quite. Because even though the version you find on YouTube is the standard edition of the album, there was a deluxe edition that I released on Spotify and other streaming services for a time, and it is no longer there. Like I said, the reason why was because it screwed up my radio station on Spotify. It put a bunch of random singer-songwriters that sounded nothing like me. So I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna take these down because that's not where these people do not sound like where I'm creatively at. So, and it was nothing against them necessarily. I'm not saying like, oh, I don't want to be associated with these artists because I think they're bad. They were fine, but they sounded nothing like what I was going for. So I deleted those albums to fix my radio station so my fan base would be less confused along with me. But with that being said, like I said, there was a deluxe edition there that had another set of tracks. And that second set of tracks originally had nothing to do with Proxy Teen. And it was originally a worship demo of worship songs that I had written myself. And it was called Life. And there was originally going to be a death metal counterpart to it called Death, Life and Death. And that was, and then eventually that idea just kind of faded into obscurity, and I decided to drop the whole Life and Death concert. Might pick back up on it later, not really sure. But it was so drastic of a decision that I needed to change the name of the demo EP of the worship album, and it went from being called Life to an album called Your Seat. And I ended up realizing what the album actually was. It wasn't ever really supposed to be called Life. It was supposed to be called Your Seat, and it was and the reason why the demo was called Your Seat, which is an awkward name in and of itself, it was like an empty seat that I wanted someone to sit there. It's like, this is your seat that I am reserving for you. And it was kind of an ironic way of inviting somebody to church, because at the time when I made those demos, I was a worship leader, and especially when I had written those songs, I was a worship leader at a time at a small community church, which I had described in the past as my lifeline at the time, which is, I guess, why it was originally called Life. But in the end, it was changed to Your Seat. That was the EP, and it ended up being the name of one of the songs, Your Seat. And that was the third track. I forget how the song goes, but anyways, I would be surprised if anybody in my fan base remembers those songs from the deluxe edition of Proxy Teen. But in any case, I guess I'll explain why that ended up being the second disc ultimately on the deluxe edition of Proxy Teen, because that was really what, to me, it was just like, well, This is kind of a standalone demo, but the songs by themselves aren't really that strong. So even though they are genuine worship songs, they're very, a lot of the meaning of those songs I felt like was only something I would understand in a sense. So I was just like, well, I'll just throw it in on proxy team, and just have that be like the worshipful counterpart to the Proxy Teen album, which was not a worship album. It was very, it was all depression. I wanted something optimistic to be the second disc as a sort of balm to the cancerous nature of Proxy Teen. With that being said, I want to mention something about the cancerous nature of the Proxy Teen album. And the reason why it sounds that way is because if you're familiar with depression, whether you've experienced it yourself or experienced somebody else that was close to you going through depression, it is very cancerous, like the actual disease. It eats at you, and it eats away at your brain. It's actual, like, physical brain damage, a lot like brain cancer, but it's psychological rather than physical. Depression is. And with that being said, I want to quickly mention somebody very important to me, two people, really. The first person being my grandmother, who is going through cancer, and she's dealing with it in a very strong manner, and she's doing well. But at the same time, the cancer is in her chest, and it makes it very difficult for her to breathe. So, so that's one way, listening to the album today, or not necessarily today, but the songs in and of themselves, even the thought of them would be helpful for me to deal with that. But also I also want to quickly mention somebody else that is important to me, and that is a young man by the name of Asher. I believe he is 14 years old, and his parents have a donation page on social media called Asher's Journey. So if any of you would like to donate to him and then to the cause of Asher's Journey, then that is available if you didn't already know. And also, it's always a good thing to do. But yeah, Proxy Team. It was a very, very special moment in time, and that leads, and it was, the entire album is about unprocessed. The entire album is about unprocessed trauma, and Perfect Hatred is about the trauma in and of itself at its core. So Proxy Teen is about unprocessed trauma, Perfect Hatred is about the trauma, and Doxy Me, which is the complete counterpart to Doxy Me, to Proxy Teen. Doxy Me is about reprocessing the unprocessed trauma that was in Proxy Teen. And the reason why I say it's the counterpart to Proxy Teen rather than Perfect Hatred is because, one, by the titles of the albums, it rhymes, so that's one obvious take from that. But also there is the matter of the fact that Doxy Me is not hip-hop, it's guitar music. The only difference is I'm not singing on Doxy Me with my voice, my vocal cords. I am singing with the guitar. And with Proxy Teen, I'm singing actual lyrics with actual words, and you can understand what I'm saying. There's structure to Proxy Teen because my life at the time was very structured and not in my control. I was being taken to all these appointments and stuff for therapy, but Doxy Me, on the other hand, now that we're diving into that and segueing off of Proxy Teen, there's not much to explain about Doxy Me, really, because there's not any words in it. It's all up to interpretation. But like I mentioned before, the album is about EMDR therapy, which is a real form of therapy that I take. And if you're not familiar with what EMDR therapy is, it is a form of therapy, obviously, where you follow somebody's fingers with your eyes, and they move they put two fingers together, and they move them side to side, and you follow them with your eyes, and it creates this binaural effect in your brain, your nervous system in your brain, to rewire the emotions that are affecting you in a negative way and rerouting them to the back of your mind to where you just view them as facts. And it's a very intense experience and very emotional. Reprocessing trauma and stuff. It's very intense. And now let me just stop right there. For those of you who might be questioning why am I so open about these sensitive subjects of mental health and stuff like that, I've always, and my only explanation for that is I don't have one. I don't feel the need to explain myself. I'm just a transparent person. I don't use a filter. I speak my mind and let that be that. And I say what needs to be said. I try to be a man of few words, but here I am making a whole hour-long podcast, so there's also that. But yeah, but anyways, I digress. Doxy Me has a track list on YouTube, and each moment in the track list represents a certain section of what an EMDR therapy session is like. And that's really what Doxy Me describes. It's just a structureless ambience, really, in a musical form, at least from my perspective. And I sing with my guitar rather than my voice and with words. For example, there's the second track, Good Morning, where I say good morning with my guitar very obviously, like good morning. And you know, it was just a creative way of just doing things differently, and it was very effective for me. And you know, because the whole structureless matter of Doxy Me is the reason why it was structureless ambience rather than actual music, was because the EMDR process feels that way. It doesn't feel like, you know, there's a rhythm to it. It's just this headspace that you get in, and, you know, it's just this, you know, there isn't really there's no structure of it in your mind. You know, that's what the therapist does. They do the structure, and you're just there to get in the headspace. And that's what the EMDR thing does. And that's why I made Doxy Me. It was from a perspective of a patient of that type of treatment. And I consider it, you know, it was very well done. And I'm very proud of it. But yeah, the whole, as I described before, I think I've described it before, you know, the whole, but also another reason why I made it structureless, because the whole process just feels like a bunch of yada yada yada. And so that's one thing on that topic. That's one thing I'll get into before I end this podcast, is explaining all of the samples that I can remember off the top of my head and what each one of them are. So we'll start with the yada 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 thing. I took that sample from Seinfeld, the TV show Seinfeld. And if you're familiar with the TV show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But moving forward, let's go. Another sample is the guy that says, DJ, hit me. That's Mac Miller. From the music video called Knock Knock. Another one is I See Right Through to You. That was from a DJ called DJ Encore. It's a Eurobeat type of song. And another one is Shine. That's a song by Newsboys, not the modern Newsboys, the classic, when it was just a bunch of Australian guys. Old school. If you're not familiar with Newsboys, let alone the old school Newsboys, I highly recommend you go check them out, especially the music video Shine. They are weird, and it wasn't until later on that they became more radio friendly with like the God's Not Dead movie and stuff like that. Originally back in the 90s, they were whack, but I love it. So if you're into my music, there's a chance that you might be to classic Newsboys. But anyways, moving on to that, we'll go to the sound effect that you hear, the dun 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 dun. That is Shine a Light by the C90s. You may have heard of it off of Grand Theft Auto 5. There's also another thing, children's TV show. It was from an old kids show that I used to watch as a child called Pappyland. you hear that somewhere. It says Pappy Land, and then you hear he is an artist. That was taken from another kid's show I watched called Easter Egg Morning, and highly recommend you watch that one day on Easter. I plan on doing it. Be a great nostalgia trip. Even if you haven't seen it before, it does have a very nostalgic feel to it. Early 90s cartoons, early 2000s type of deal. But also, I use a lot of other samples from bands like Portishead and Smash Mouth, Linkin Park. That's one thing I put on there was the Who Cares part from the song One More Light. And I put that as kind of a funny little sequence right before the reprocessing begins. You hear the term, I see right through to you. And then you hear, who cares? And then, boom, the reprocessing starts, and that woo sound that you hear in Doxy Me is the representation of the movement back and forth, side to side, of following the fingers with your eyes and stuff like that. It has that that panning left to right, but it's also dead in the center because you're looking right at it. You're not looking left to right with your heads, and that's why it doesn't move from the left speaker to the right speaker, but you can still hear it as if it were the sound was moving that way, but it's still like right in the center because it's like right in front of you, and it's has a very trippy aspect to it, which is why I made it sci-fi, because I wanted to make it sound spacey, to kind of embrace the head space type of aspect of it. But I added all and then I added all the sound effects to kind of as a representation of memories that are cycling through my head, and then there's also the guitar aspect of it, which is what I guess I will leave this podcast on, is the guitar. This is where I'll segue out, is the guitar is, I guess, not really, I don't know. But the guitar part of the album was made with a foot pedal that my older brother got for me by the name of Echo Verb. E-K-O-V-E-R-B. Echo Verb. And it's a very useful pedal for creating atmosphere, a wall of sound of sorts. And that's what I used to create the album, the entirety of the musical aspect of it. And it was also heavily inspired by Devin Townsend's ambient project, Dream Piece, along with his two pandemic albums, The Puzzle and Snuggles. Those two albums, Puzzle and Snuggles. Me and my wife actually listen to the album Snuggles every night because, it's a good album to, snuggle to. It's a very sweet album. But, there's also the counterpart, Puzzle, and that's kind of the mixture. I wanted the album to sound comforting like Snuggles and discomforting like the Puzzle at the same time, because that's also the feeling of EMDR therapy. You know that you're in a safe space, but at the same time you're going through a lot of memories that made you feel the most unsafe of all time. And it's a very there's nothing else like it. And that's another reason why I made it that way. And again, the name Doxy Me is the name of the website. And, I also made it the sci-fi aspect of it because, I'm doing it online. It's digital, which is very, which is very, Star Trek-like, I guess, because, the internet and FaceTime and all of that stuff was originally just in Star Trek back in, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Stuff like that didn't become a thing until, the mid-2010s. And so I wanted to add that aspect to it, but also the last aspect was also of the whole spaciness was spacing out, getting high and stuff like that. And I also use that as a balm for, the metaphorical relapse and stuff like that I sang about in Perfect Hatred. So there's also that. But anyways, I guess that does that for the entirety of Proxy Teen and Doxy Me. And just a little tidbit, I drove the entire time I was talking. I drove my car the entire time I was talking about Proxy Teen, and I was parked at my apartment the whole time I was talking about Doxy Me. So the process of moving and being still, Proxy Teen, I was running away from all my problems, trying to weather it out, and then Doxy Me was reprocessing all of that and just being still and sitting with it. And at the end of the day, realizing that I'm safe, which is the reason why at the end of the album I play Jesus Loves Me in a structureless time signature. And you can hear that audibly, and at the 23-minute mark I play it very quietly, but if you hear it, it's very ethereal. And that's the way it was making me feel at the time, And ironically enough, I made both albums after a mental breakdown, and that was my way of coping with it. It's just the difference with Proxy Teen is I didn't know how to process it, and with Doxy Me I did. So it's a symbol of accomplishment there. So it was the counterpart to Proxy Teen, but it was also a balm for Perfect Hatred, because Perfect Hatred was very aggressive and over the top and, just wired like crazy and, manic and depressed and all this stuff. And then Proxy Teen was just chill, and in the middle of it, it gets weird and bizarre sounding, and then it's chill again. It's very, it's a process, and that's what the project sounds like. It's not really an album, it's an experience. And so, but yeah, so there you have it. That is the ambient, that is the the rough acoustic EP called Proxy Teen, and also the ambient project I just released called Doxy Me, back to back. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. If you have listened to it, if you've made it this far, thank you. I really appreciate giving your time. But hey, at the end of the day, if nobody listens to it, it's really just it can just boil down to, a note to self, really, because I listen. I'll be the first one to admit that I listen to these podcasts too. So, and I listen to it just to kind of keep a note of, where I'm at creatively, so to speak. Next podcast is going to be about my upcoming project called Perfect Love. More than likely, it's going to be about my upcoming project, Perfect Love. Actually, no, I've made up my mind on that. It is going to be about Perfect Love. My upcoming album, which is the official counterpart to Perfect Hatred. And I'm very excited about that and to dig into that. But with that being said, I am, it's New Year's Eve, so I hope y'all have a happy new year. And I have a New Year's gift for y'all, and it's going to be a album visualizer for the deluxe edition of Perfect Hatred. It has side A, the actual album, the standard edition, and then it has all the B-sides for and there's a visualizer for all the B-sides too. And so there's that, there's a album visualizer for side A and side B. And I'm very excited for y'all to see that. I think it's, I put it together on iMovie, and it's, it's not, it's not like the coolest visualizer in the world by any means, It doesn't have, it doesn't have any lyrics or anything like that. It just, pictures that move sometimes. Either the pictures move very slowly or very fast. Occasionally there's like a full-on video. Of course, there's a music video for Fake a Smile Part 2 that's part of the visualizer. But yeah, I'm really excited for y'all to see that. And man, sometimes it's kind of hard to make these podcasts and not feel like I'm full of myself. Just listening to myself talk, I love hearing the sound of my own voice. But nah, that's not the point of these podcasts. The point is to just use it to organize and sort through my creative process and upload it to YouTube for anybody who wants to be in on my, who wants to see where I'm at before I go there, I guess. Or if I've already been there, they want to know what went into it, Just because, I already talk about it enough on the phone with my friends, so I just, I try to say less and put more onto the podcast nowadays. So, anyways, I thought I'd run out of time at this point, but I think I'm just going to stop the podcast here. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed everything, and again, I hope y'all have a happy new year and eat tons of popcorn or something. I don't know. Anyways, love y'all, every single one of you. Freedom